welcome to Beth's Coming Clean. I'm Peggy the Enforcer.
I'm Granny Lisa, and tonight's special guest is Kristin Leone. Did I say that correctly?
It's Leone, close enough.
Awesome. Great. Anyway, I've known her for about, I'd say 4 months, 5 months, maybe 6 now. Time is just nowhere near anything that I think. But she is a local, well, when I say local, in our family of podcasters. And she was with, and she is with MBR Radio and has a great show that she does. And so I think it's called the Diva,
Dog Tag Diva.
Dog Tag Diva. And it's got a great little picture too. So anyway, I'm going to let,
me.
there you go, there it is. And I'm going to let her go ahead and introduce herself and give some information. And then Peggy and I will say, what have you seen? So go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for having me tonight. I'm very excited to be amongst female veterans and share my story. And so, yeah, I was born and raised in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, which is just outside of Philadelphia. So I kind of grew up sandwiched between Philadelphia and Atlantic City. So I kind of, grew up at the beach and I grew up in the city. I spent many hours on end in Philadelphia. So I have since moved to Florida a year and a half ago. And if you're not from the area that I am from, people say where you're from. It's just easier for me to say Philadelphia because people know kind of where Philadelphia is instead of saying, well, I'm from Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Like if I say Philadelphia, people go, oh, okay. But I spent a lot of time in Philadelphia. My grandparents, lived in South Philadelphia. I worked in Philadelphia most of my nursing career. I spent so much time in Philadelphia. I mean, it's not hard for me to make the jump to say to people like I'm from Philly. Yes, I bleed green. I almost had a heart attack on Sunday watching the Eagles game versus the Cowboys. I thank God they have a bye week this week because my heart needs a rest.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I have been a registered nurse for 25 years. I have been in the Navy Reserves for 12 years. I have a husband. I have a son who is 21. I have a fur baby. Who is her real name is Bella, but I call her the Hot Mess Express. But yeah, so I was deployed to Afghanistan 2015. I had my own TV show when I was in New Jersey, and I loved it. And then I moved down here to Florida, and trying to find a studio, the expense just wasn't there. And then I found Military Broadcast Radio, and they said we'd love to have podcasters, and I said I had my own TV show. I don't know, I went to broadcasting school, so I learned a little bit about podcasting, but the technology kind of eludes me. So I miss my TV show because I just kind of showed up with my guests and did the interview, and we talked, and everybody did stuff around me, and now I'm kind of responsible for doing like 14 things at once with technology, and technology is not my friend. The struggle is real. So.
It is very real. Believe me, it is.
Absolutely.
So you did the same thing with your TV show?
Yeah. So I had a TV show. It was on RVN television, rvntv.com, and it was called Breaking Barriers. That was my show. And so when I moved down here and then I found Military Broadcast Radio, I couldn't use the name Breaking Barriers because it was kind of like contractually with the RVN kind of owns it, so to speak. So I needed to find a new title for podcast show, what have you. And I had been kicking around the Dog Tag Diva for a really long time, even before I found MBR. So kind of where that came from. I wear dog tags as a nurse in the military. I wear dog tags, and it just kind of made sense to me. And then I saw this picture and thought, hey, this would make a great tattoo. So I got the tattoo, and then I thought, you know what? That should be my logo for my podcast, or whenever it comes to fruition. So that's kind of where that all came about. The mission and vision of my TV show was to educate, motivate, and inspire. And I basically took that same mission statement and just kind of applied it to my podcast.
Wow. Sounds very like you have have a well-versed background and variety in your background, not just medical knowledge, but broadcasting experience and interviewing a variety of different people. And I'm sure along your career in medical, you've met a lot of people. So what have you seen that led you to go through these different paths? There's Granny, she's back.
Sorry.
Hey, Granny, welcome back. Technology, we talked about this. So I have seen and done a lot in my lifetime. You know, I have always been an open person and not afraid to talk about my, the good and the bad. And so I've struggled just like a lot of people. I'm a domestic violence survivor. I was married at one time to a man who was, an alcoholic and verbally and physically, abusive. And that's part of my life. I don't have a problem talking about. In that period of time, I also suffered 4 miscarriages, and that was definitely a period of my life that I pushed to the side, didn't really talk about. I had no problem talking about, the abuse, no problem talking about my time in service or my career and some of the other struggles that I've had. And then a friend of mine said to me, you're very vocal about wanting to help people and have others learn from your struggles, but you're not telling the whole story. I'm like, yeah, but that part of the story sucks. He said, well, yeah, but it's still a part of your story, and you need to get, I think you could help so many more people if you find that space where you're comfortable talking about that piece of it. And part of that was because I struggled with that period of my life for a really long time. It took about 10 years to really kind of move past that and be able to talk about it with and share my story with other people. And it's through, everything happens for a reason. I was competing in a contest, and part of the platform was advocacy. And I was, reaching out to local organizations, radio, TV, newspapers, wherever, to kind of advocate for homeless female veterans was my particular platform. And I wound up on a radio show near my house, down near the shore in Ocean City, and met a great Vietnam veteran who I am still in contact with, which reminds me I need to call him. But he invited me on his radio show, and I met an individual there, my good friend, Reverend Dr. Paul McCullough. And the second that I met him, I felt that there was a reason that he and I had been brought together. And we served on a board together. We became very good friends. And even though I'm Navy and he's Army, and I'm a Republican and he's a Democrat, we find that space in the middle where we just have this great friendship, and we talk about lots of things and support each other through life. He's kind of helped me not only as a friend and a colleague, but also he's helped me kind of slowly reconnect in my faith as well. So we've had this great relationship, and it is because of my conversations with him and kind of describing my struggle with the miscarriages and why I kind of walked away from the church that we kind of came together, and I found this space of healing. And another friend that I had met during my advocacy, I mentioned something to him. And so it's really kind of was a joint effort between 2 people that kind of helped me move past this pain, so that I'm in a place where I can kind of talk about, everything, all the struggles, not just, the specific things that, I think that I'm okay talking about. It's gotta be the whole story. It's not just, yeah, I was deployed to Afghanistan and that sucked. Yeah, I worked on the front lines of the pandemic and that was bullshit. It's, you can't just pick and choose. You have to tell the whole story, because you never know what piece is going to help someone. And, your story may be the path that helps somebody else, the blueprint that helps somebody else. So
Absolutely.
it's been a journey. I will say that I felt a huge difference after I had kind of let that pain go, because I thought I let it go, but I really didn't. And there was a lingering piece that I had to let go of. And so the first miscarriage I had, I wound up having to have a D&C. And after the procedure, they gave me this stuffed animal that I carried around with me for months on end because I just couldn't let it go because of what it represented. And then I was able to at least put it down, and then it just kind of sat and sat and sat for years on my dresser because I didn't know what to do with it. And my friend Paul, who's a minister, he's like, well, what would you do if it had, what do we do with people when they die? I'm like, well, you cremate them or you bury them, but it didn't feel right to, like, where would I bury this bear? And like, I can't like burn it, what, in my fireplace and the fire, like, there was no way for me to really kind of handle how I really wanted to process it and deal with it. And he said to me, well, because I had reached out to some local funeral homes and even like some pet crematories, and nobody said like, no, we don't do that. No, we don't even want to be involved with that. Like, no, it's not even worth our time. And so I got a little frustrated, and it actually made it hurt more. I'm like, I'm trying to deal with this shit, and I'm meeting resistance. And I was talking to Paul about it, and he's like, well, I have a friend who has a funeral home. Let me talk to her. And she reached out to me herself and said, I am more than happy to help you with this. Please bring your item to us and we will take care of it. And I was like, okay, step one has been handled. And then I struggled with, how do I do this? Like, how do I take this thing and this bear to this funeral home and drop it off and then leave it there and do what? Like so I was still kind of struggling with it because I didn't want to go by myself. And that's when I reached out to another friend of mine who has James Corbett of Project Refit. And they have a couple times a week, they have something called Radio Check, Buddy Check. So they have live streams just like similar to this. And they just come together and military, law enforcement, first responders, and just kind of talk and support each other through their mental health journeys and struggles. And I had mentioned it on that particular night, and my friend James was there, and he was like, no, you're not going by yourself. I'm going with you. And I was like, okay. So as soon as somebody kind of gave me permission to go with support, then it made it easier to handle it. And he and his girlfriend came with me, we drove into Center City, and we dropped the bear off at the funeral home. And then I went back a couple days later with another friend of mine and picked up the ashes. And then they just kind of sat on my bureau again for a little bit until I had the time to go to the beach. And then I spread the ashes, and and it was very cathartic to just kind of have that sense of saying goodbye and letting go. And my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, it was really funny because it was in like a jar, and of course like the wind picked up and it kind of blew some of them back like onto me. So it was just kind of very funny, like funny moment. And then I had the jar, and he's like, what are you doing with that? He's like, no. We're here for you to have some peace and to let go. He's like, you need to throw the container out. And I was like, okay. So I did. And then we were down the shore. So then I went into a store and bought a pair of earrings to kind of commemorate like the healing. He was like, that makes way more sense than holding on to this jar and holding on to that pain. He's like, you need to let go of the pain, have something positive and move forward. So that was really kind of, I have to say, a healing moment for carrying that pain for just 10 years. Like I said, I had thought I had dealt with it. I even got a tattoo to kind of commemorate all the losses that I had experienced. And I'm like, oh, I'm good. And I really wasn't until I kind of had that moment of, it's time to let this go and move forward. And I made a big difference. Made a really big difference. And Paul was on my podcast a few weeks ago. We have great conversations about leadership and religion. And one of the things that I had struggled with recently as a nurse was just this concept of faith healing. Families that don't want to, really, like, you bring your loved one to the hospital because you want medical care, and then the providers say, this is what we need to do. And then the family says, well, no, we don't want to do anything right now. We're just going to, give it to God and let him decide. In the meantime, patients are suffering while you're praying, and we could be doing other things. And then in the process, patients suffer and we have to watch it, and then they die. And so Great conversations about that kind of thing as well. And that struggle is real. Healthcare is a struggle right now for not only healthcare workers, but a lot of people who are like seeking medical care. And I'm in it, so I know how to navigate the system, but there are a lot of people out there who don't know how to navigate the system, don't know what questions to ask, don't know what they're looking for. And I can't even imagine what that's like. I was frustrated with, my son struggles with some issues, and in order to start medication, he needed an EKG, which takes about 5 minutes. His primary at the time switched to a different, had been taken over by a hospital system and could only see like 4 or 5 patients a day. And he couldn't see my son for like 2 months. And I didn't want my son to wait that long for medication. And the amount of hours I had to spend on the phone just trying to find where to get my son an EKG, a 5-minute test, was just beyond frustrating and absurd. And like I said, I'm in healthcare, and I knew what questions to ask, and I knew where to go. And it still took me a period of time. And part of the reason that I got what I needed is because I just happen to know people in the industry and from networking. And but what about people that don't know any better? It just boggles my mind. I don't know what's going on. Half the time I feel like, I was just talking to my therapist last month. I said, I feel like I'm part of the problem, not part of the solution. And he said, why? I'm like, because I'm in healthcare, and healthcare is a mess right now.
I understand that feeling, though. Honestly, I have a question, since you do work in healthcare. If an individual goes in and they are allergic to a large number of prescription drugs and they prefer herbal remedies, how best do you approach that with your provider or your nursing staff?
That's a great question, and that happens quite a lot. There's a lot of people who want to combine, Eastern and Western medication. It just depends on what is it. Is it something that you have in a bottle that's got ingredients on it that can be sent to pharmacy that they can look at and see, will this have interaction with any other, traditional medications? Because that's really important. There may have to be, okay, well, we may not be able to use this right now while you're here in the hospital because of constraints due to, we don't know what's in this. We don't know how it's going to interact with your medications. So it just depends on what it is, but it's never going to hurt you to say, I would like to try this. Can we? Because you are your own best advocate. I think it's really important. Not enough people do this, but I am such a huge advocate for having conversations with your families about what your wishes are. If anything that I say tonight goes over your head, that's fine, but please hear me when I say it saves us as your nurses and healthcare and your doctors so much stress and aggravation if your family knows your wishes. I can't tell you how much it actually causes us so much stress and moral injury as we are watching family members argue at the bedside over a patient who is really, really sick. And it's just heartbreaking to watch families fighting. It's heartbreaking to watch patients suffer. So I know the conversations are hard to have, but they need to be had. Like this is what I want. Put it in writing in a power of attorney, have a medical power of attorney, have a living will. Let somebody that you know and love and trust know your wishes, because we do not like walking out of your room and crying out of sheer frustration because families just can't get along. And so years we had a family doc who would do home visit. Now you're lucky to get an appointment. Yeah, speak to a doctor. Yeah, honestly, the wait times are really long to see specialists. Everything has to go through the primary now. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, because your primary doctor should be aware of all your medical issues and how they're being treated. And he may have to refer you out for things. That's fine. But I think it also overwhelms their primary doctor as well. And not everybody has healthcare. And, we know that, look, inflation is rising, costs are rising on everything, including healthcare. And, people are having trouble buying groceries. So naturally, they're going to have an issue with their healthcare as well. And when they can't afford primary care, then they go to the ER to seek treatment. And then we have the ERs are overrun. And it just, like I said, it just creates like this snowball effect of a shitstorm that if I could figure out the answer, I would be rich. But this is why we can't have nice things.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, but it is real, because I was stuck in that circle for a very long time, and it is very frustrating. In fact, I just think a primary doctor is a secretary. He sits there and listens to what you need, and then he makes the appointments to go to the other doctors, because I remember a primary doctor could handle pretty much everything except surgery, and sometimes even that. Now you have all these specialists, and so they're sucking up more money out of you, and to me, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know, like I said, what the answer is. And then, we have a nursing shortage that was already existing before the pandemic. And then the pandemic just kind of threw it into a tailspin. I read an article a while back, and I don't remember the exact percentage, but between March of 21 and March of 22, we lost, if I'm remembering correctly, about 14% of the nursing workforce. They just left nursing completely. And I believe it. And I bet the number is probably a little bit higher than that. But I believe it. I mean, my one girlfriend alone left nursing and went into real estate. I know lots of nurses that left the hospital and went into either primary care or outpatient. They're doing like something, not in the hospital, but there's a very large number of nurses that have left the field completely. And what that has done to nursing is that now we have younger, newer nurses training the brand new baby nurses that are coming out of nursing school. And, during the pandemic, nursing school, everything was shut down. And that meant that nursing schools were teaching nurses how to be nurses virtually, which is, I know it was a means to an end and they had to do something, but there's no way that you can tell me that their experience is close to what they would have gotten in the clinical setting. So we had nurses that graduated during the pandemic and, for like 6 months to a year after the pandemic that really didn't have a lot of hands-on time. And now they're being trained by nurses who all they know is COVID and the pandemic. So we've really got a lot of catching up to do. We've lost a lot of our experienced veteran, superstar nurses. And so we're kind of in this little, I don't know, like muck of, of nursing. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just because and who's left behind is burnout. Like the veteran nurses are burnout. I just stepped away from the bedside myself in February because I just couldn't do it anymore. I'm like, I just can't do this. And I've been a nurse for 25 years and I loved nursing. Even on my worst days, I still loved my job. And the pandemic has broken me in a way that I don't know how to rebuild myself. I just don't know what I have the energy for. And it's sad because for me, it hurts my heart because I knew from the time that I was 12 years old that I wanted to be a nurse. It's what I wanted to do. And everybody's like, well, when you were a kid, what did you want to be? I'm like, I wanted to be a nurse. That was my dream job. And now I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? Where is my creativity? I come from a family of doctors. I have several people in my family who were doctors, and that was my original idea. I was like, oh, I'll go be a doctor. And then, I kind of listened to, the doctors around me talking about how much time, it was for school and the lack of sleep and the money for med school. And I was like, let me rethink this. I'm like, oh, I'll be a nurse. Like that's the best of both worlds, right? I could still be at the bedside and still help people, but still have work-life balance. I won't have to be working hours a week, and I'll still be able to get sleep and but still be there. And it just seemed like a fit for me from the time that I was, that young, and I never regretted it. And then the pandemic hit, and society kind of lost their mind. And we were heroes for about a hot second, and then everybody hated us. And then Congress wanted to get involved and cap the travel nurse salaries. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I seriously, like, shut up and sit down. If you are a man in a suit who's never set foot in a hospital, you need to shut up and sit down and stay away from us. And you should be figuring out, how do you help us support each other and build things up, as opposed to trying to put caps on things. I mean, we've been fighting for federal safe staffing ratios for years. And all of a sudden, oh, well, we have to cap the salaries. They're making too much money. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, do you know you have no idea what it's like to be in a hospital when you are short-staffed. And I have no patience or tolerance for anybody who tries to give me any kind of advice who was home during the pandemic. I have no time for your bullshit and your stories. Like, I don't even want to hear you. You're going to judge me. Where were you during the pandemic? Oh, you were home? Nah, I was on the front line, not having it.
Mike's sister is a nurse.
Exactly.
What she told you about how hard it was, didn't she, honey?
Oh yeah. She talked about every day coming home and literally having to strip clothes in the garage and keep everybody away from her until she could get to the shower. Or she was so paranoid, it was unreal.
Yeah, I actually bought a clear plastic shower curtain and wrapped the front seat of my car in the shower curtain, so that when I came home from work, all I had to do was wipe it down with a Clorox wipe, and then I could, this way I wouldn't have to worry about, because we didn't know how long it was going to sit, like in clothing or like cloth, like your car seats and things. So I was like, oh, if I wrap it in plastic, I can wipe it down and keep it clean and not worry about that. And then I had a mud room in my old house, and I would come in the laundry room and take my shoes off and spray my shoes. And then I put little hooks on the back of the door so I could hang my shoes, spray them, and they could, dry with the Lysol or the Clorox on them. I would strip down to everything, to nothing, and throw everything right in the washer and throw on my robe and go upstairs and shower right away. And my son, bless his heart, was like, Mom, I'm not afraid of that shit. I don't care. It's like, just go shower first. But he was not avoiding me. And he was like, I'm not having it, Mom. I don't care. And it's like, I think he was 18. He was 17, almost 18. He was a senior in high school when, when the shit hit the fan, and old enough to make, his own decisions. And I was like, it's your choice, kiddo. I'm not going to tell you what to do or not to do. And, the isolation was a mess. And, it was, for us, it was, who were on the front lines. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, somebody was asking me, like, what was it like? And the only comparison I can make, it was like being deployed. Like, it was just it was like being deployed on the island of Lord of the Flies.
Did they give y'all the, I know we saw a picture of some nurses that had the face shields, full face with oxygen attached at the VA.
No, we just had like the regular N95 masks, and then we put the surgical mask over it. And in the very beginning, they just had us with the TB mask, with the surgical mask. And then all of a sudden, within, I think, a couple of weeks, they decided, oh, you need to have face protection too. So you had to have a face shield on as well. And I remember them telling some of the nurses who had fake eyelashes, like, you need to take them off because we can't risk some of the COVID particles getting stuck to the eye, because they're bigger, the extensions, and they didn't want to risk like any of the COVID particles getting on the eyelids and getting in your eyes, like in your mucous membranes, and infecting you with COVID. So it was just total insanity. And what people don't understand is it was, when you're in an ICU, you've got monitors, and then you've got what we call like slave stations. They're like additional monitors that show you like the patient's vital signs and everything, that are, transferred from the monitor in the patient room to this additional station where all these are. So all the doors were shut to all the patient rooms, but so the slave stations would still alarm just like the monitors would in the room. And then the screens for the ventilators came off the ventilator, and they were outside the room as well. So that respiratory could still make changes to the ventilator without having to put all the stuff on and go in the room. Because remember, one of the big issues was we weren't going to have enough PPE for protection. So how do we minimize having to put that shit on and go in a patient room? And that was, well, we put the IV pumps outside the room, and then you had the ventilator monitor outside the room. So now you've got IV pumps, and my ICU was 45 beds. So now you've got multiple IV pumps all outside the rooms that are dinging and alarming. And now you've got multiple ventilators dinging and alarming. You've got the slave stations alarming, phones ringing off the hook because family members were desperate to get information on their loved ones because no one was allowed in the hospital. And so and then all the rooms had large HEPA filters in the room. So that's making noise as well. I mean, if you want to talk about sensory overload, I went into that environment. Like, I came home from Afghanistan with PTSD, and then the pandemic sure as shit didn't help anything. So there's all this noise and all this stress, and family members were just, rightly so, stressed and upset and angry. And so there was just so much overload of, sounds and emotions. And, if your patient was sick and you had to go in a room and you're in a plastic gown and 2 masks and gloves and like a face, and you're just like, I remember like days where like I would come out of a patient room because I had been stuck in there for a while, and just like you could see the sweat like under the plastic gown, and it was just crazy. And the patients were just dying left and right. And it was just like, I had an entire month where every shift I had a patient die. Like, and in the course of a month, if you work 3 shifts a week times 4 weeks in a month, that was 12 patients in 1 month, which is more than I had lost probably in several years. And I'm an experienced critical care nurse. Like, that was a lot. It was just a lot of shit. And that same month was when Afghanistan fell, and I was just off my ass. Like, I did not know which end was up. I couldn't even talk. My husband was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I don't know." Like, I didn't even know what to say. I didn't even know how to verbalize what I was feeling. It was just a shit show. And that's why I kind of have zero patience or tolerance for people who judge me or have comments about how I live my life or decisions that I have made on whatever situation. Like, you haven't walked in my shoes. If you're going to judge me based on one side of the story that you're hearing, like, I don't have time for you. That's just because it's bullshit. Like, it's just bullshit. Like, don't come at me and tell me you're mad about this and you don't even know my side of the story. Like, just go away. Because I'm over your shit.
I completely understand that. Don't you, Granny?
I sure do. I had it on mute because I have a lot of activity going on. But I lost an ex-sister-in-law in ICU. She had kidney failure, and but the family couldn't because it was during the pandemic. And so I can hear you on what the nurses were so sympathetic and compassionate. But they looked, I guess, from what I was told, very tired, very haggard. And to be able to still show that compassion is beyond me. That's, like you said, it has to be like a war zone. It was its own war.
It was a mess because they weren't, and the early part of it, they weren't allowing anybody into the hospital, period, even if the patient was dying. And and then even towards the end, when they were starting to let people come in only if the patient was dying, there was still a large number of people that weren't coming in. And I mean, I said at one point, if I have to hold the hand of one more dying patient, I'm going to lose my mind. And I am that nurse that number one, I just can't let people die alone. Like, I wouldn't want to be alone. I won't let people die alone. And I know that it was COVID and I knew it was dangerous, but I would go in there and take off one glove so they could feel like there was an actual human being in the room with them. There was skin to skin contact. So I would at least hold their hand with my ungloved hand, and I would just wash my hand afterwards, Mike, because I can't fathom the idea of sitting in a room and letting them feel a glove, rubber, as they're passing. And I was like, if I have to do this one more time, I swear, like, I probably should be an alcoholic.
But now that you are in the podcasting world, and you're in Florida, have you seen anything unusual? That might be the da 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 da.
No, I Florida is just different, and it's a very relaxed lifestyle down here. So, I come from the Philadelphia area. We're very aggressive. Like, I'm your typical obnoxious Eagles fan. I went to the Buccaneers game with my battle buddy, and he was like, "Oh my God, y'all are obnoxious." I'm like, "I tried to tell you." But I haven't seen anything weird. I'm still adjusting to this relaxed lifestyle down here. Like, nobody gets dressed up for anything, which suits me just fine. Like, I would rather be barefoot and in my flip flops with, doesn't bother me one little bit. But I tend to be, very blunt, to the point, and it's not kind of how they roll down here. So I'm just still getting used to that. I've seen one alligator down in Sebring when we were going to see my in-laws. I enjoy the Gulf side. I'm here in Clearwater, so I enjoy the Gulf, Clearwater. It's nice and warm. I've seen manatees swimming in the Gulf many times when I've been to the beach, which is really kind of cool and fun. I enjoy the palm trees, and I'm kind of obsessed with pelicans. I'm not even gonna lie. Probably a good thing we can't have them as pets, because I would probably have one in my backyard if I could. I enjoy the podcast because I like connecting people to resources. I like telling people's story. I like putting good information out there. I feel today there's a lot of negative shit going on, and everybody just wants to talk trash, and there's so many people, so everybody wants to be famous without doing anything, and I'm just kind of over that. And Maya Angelou said, be the change you wish to see in the world, and that's kind of what I'm about. Like, I want to connect you to resources. I want to put good information out there, people overcoming obstacles, connecting people to where they want to be, need to be. I had on Rock Roke, who's one of the co-founders of the Tampa Bay Veterans Day Parade a couple weeks ago. And, like, that's a great resource to have. Like, put that information out there. And I had another guest on who is the founder of an organization called Battle Buddies, and they train dogs for veterans. But they don't, if you have a dog that you've picked, they still help you train that dog to do what you need to do, which I think is kind of cool. Like, why go to an organization? If you can't go to an organization that gives you a dog, you find a dog that, look, I'm an animal person. I've had pets my entire life. Sometimes you find an animal that just speaks to you. And if this organization can train this dog that I have found to be the service dog that I need, that's great. But I was able to connect those two. And I said, hey, do you know that there's a parade in Tampa for Veterans Day Parade? And she's like, no, I didn't know that. I said, look, maybe next year you and your group could walk in the parade, and that's advertising for your organization. Or allowing, a friend of mine came to me and said, I'm ready to tell my story about my anxiety and my PTSD and my suicide attempt. Can I come on your podcast? And I said, absolutely. That's a great story for you to say, this is what I was feeling, this is how I overcame it, and this is how I'm moving forward. So I want to be able to give people that space to tell their story and what they've overcome, and, interesting things. Like tonight, my guests are from an organization called Combat Diver Foundation. I didn't even know that was such a thing. Like, how cool. Like, they're going to come on and talk about what that training is all about, and why, preserving that history is so important. Especially, my Vietnam veterans. I will talk about Diane Carlson Evans all day long. Wrote an amazing book called Healing Wounds, and she was an Army nurse in Vietnam. It's an amazing book and an amazing story, and she is, the reason why there is this beautiful memorial to the Vietnam women who served during Vietnam in Washington, D.C. And So that's what I'm about, is putting all that good information out there, preserving history, honoring our Vietnam veterans. I volunteer with Honor Flight Mission because it's an amazing organization. That's how I fill my bucket. Just when you think like this can't get any worse, you go to an honor flight mission, a welcome home, and then you just kind of look around and see and feel the patriotism of people who still believe in, this country and the strength and beauty and honoring our veterans. And you go, oh, okay, faith in humanity restored. I can carry on another day.
Yeah, I saw your live video and I thought it was pretty cool. And I thought, oh, yeah, I forgot all about that. They do that. So it was really cool to see it again. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, Honor Flight, and the great thing about Honor Flight is that they're national. So you can find an Honor Flight, chapter near you, and they only do it 4 times a year. So it's a great organization to get involved with. You could, and there's multiple ways to get involved. And that's one of the reasons why I talk about it. And I'm actually in War College right now for the Navy. And I took a picture with one of the veterans who was a Korean War veteran. And it was the two of us dancing to the twist together. And our instructor likes us to share pictures of like, what did you do this week? And I shared this particular picture. And one of the guys in the class said, tell me more about Honor Flight. I would love to get involved. So see, that's what it's all about, is just the networking and putting all that good information out there and just supporting each other, sharing each other, modeling the behavior. I am that person. Like, I'm never going to ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do for myself. So I try very hard to listen to people. It's not about being right. It's just, I want to hear what you have to say, and I want to validate your feelings. And then we'll have a conversation about, all right, how do we move forward if there's a problem? And if you just need to be heard and be validated, then I want to do that too. I want to be a leader in my community and walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Absolutely. Granny, we can't hear you.
I know, I forgot.
It's all right. It happens, sister.
I said, yep, that's right.
Oh, okay. I thought you were asking a question. That's why I was like,
no,
wait.
I was just agreeing with everything she was saying. It's like, that's the way it should be. We should, I don't know. I think that as female veterans, that we have that extra part of our womanhood that can give that positivity to where, and I'm not trying to say, men are different. They are different. They're made different. Their emotions are different. And so, not that they don't have compassion, because I've met several men that do have compassion. But in general, it's usually from the women in history that have brought, what is that word? Not love, but compassion, and to the organizations.
The compassion, I think, the big humanity,
yes,
the big picture.
For veterans.
Yeah, and that's kind of why, I would like to put myself in a place where one day I could run for political office, because I feel that a lot of the reason why women's issues and veterans issues fall through the cracks is because there's not enough of either one in office. And, I'm somebody who believes in term limits. At this point, there's so many people in office right now who have just kind of gotten so complacent and comfortable in a spot that they've kind of forgotten that they're elected officials and they work for the public, the people that have voted for them. And yes, I get it. There's an agenda that has to be met. But I think we need to kind of come to the table with some fresh ideas and a new way to look at how are we dealing with the things that are, that are going on. And, because there's a lot of things that are going on, and we need to be modeling the behavior, like I said, so that we're all getting along, we're listening to each other, we're not divided. It's not about, party lines. It's about what is the right thing. And I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because I grew up on Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street. I don't know. It's a very simplistic kind of view of the world, but it's really not that complicated, right? Like, why can't we all just get along and won't you be my neighbor?
Right.
Exactly.
Well, Kristin, since you're interested in politics, have you heard of the Veterans Action Council?
I have not heard of the Veterans Action Council.
Well, we meet 3 times a week. It's Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The Fridays is every other week, the weeks that we don't meet Thursdays. And the Fridays, we have roundtables where we do interviews to people in the cannabis community. Right now, Veterans Action Council is working on getting cannabis rights worldwide and going to the UN in March to work on cannabis rights. So if you're interested in that, I can send that information to you. And also on the third Saturday, we have we're calling a mess call, because we all went to the mess hall in the military, right? So the third Sundays of the month at noon Central Standard Time, we're having a 1-hour Zoom meeting where people can come together, and it's just a buddy check-in. Veteran, civilian, doesn't matter, because everyone out there needs somebody regardless of what's going on. And so I'd like to invite you to join us for that as well.
Very cool. Sure. I'm always down for that.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that you have your podcast to get to. Was there anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up?
No, I always end my TV show with greet each day with purpose, passion, and tenacity, and be kind to each other.
Well, what is our logo?
Always remember, sharing is caring. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much.
I love it. This is great. You were wonderful. Thank you for coming on. And I can't wait to meet you in person. I know it's going to happen. We got to have a female podcasters get together.
That would be dangerous and awesome at the same time.
Exactly.
Yes, it would.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, ladies. I had a great time. I appreciate you.
Have a good night, Kristin.
Thank you. You too.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.